Hey, welcome back to Thrive in Marriage. We want to encourage you in your journey with this thought this week. Sometimes as we're creating new habits, moving towards our desired result, it may feel just a little bit awkward. You know, I remember when I first started working out, I wasn't always a gym rat. And so I didn't know a thing in the world about what I was doing really. And as I was learning form and trying to, lift the weights, it was so awkward. It was just weird.
Yep.
And I was looking at everybody else and where they were as they were working out around me and how much weight they were lifting. And it kind of felt even that much more weird. I thought, I should be, at least where they were at in their journey of lifting. But one cool thing about it is that the more I stuck with it and the more determined I was to be intentional, the more natural those movements became. I remember when I started trying to eat right at the same time.
Right.
Again, really awkward. What I learned was that I needed to not just stop eating certain things, but I needed to replace those things with other things that I could eat. And I had to learn what those new food items might be. So again, it was real intentional and really awkward for a little while until I kind of got things down pat. So you may be feeling the same way as you're trying to embrace being intentional in your marriage. You may feel like you're blowing it and that everything's awkward and that it's too difficult. It's all right. It takes a little bit of time. The more you stay at it, I promise you, the more natural it's going to come. This week, we're going to continue strengthening our marriage by building upon surrender with another vital exercise, forgiveness.
We're often asked, how do I truly forgive someone? Especially when the offense is so big. And what people are really asking is, you don't know what he's done, or you haven't seen how she treats me. How do I forgive somebody when they fill in the blank? Ephesians 4:31-32 actually provides the solution for us. It says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ, God forgave you. So here's the other part of the SUV story. You remember the story I told you last week in the last session of how God interrupted me and said, let me change in you the things that needed to be changed and allow me to change in Greg what needs to be changed. There's a whole other part to that story. You see, as I was laying there crying, just a sobbing mess, God also said, Julie, I want you to love Greg as I've loved you. And immediately I knew what that meant. You see, I went through a really dark season of time, and that dark season led me to make some really bad choices. I loved Jesus passionately, but I sure wasn't living right. And so my choices actually one night led me to an edge of a bar. And I was sitting at the edge of a bar. My intent that night was to get as drunk as possible, as quick as possible. I truly didn't want to be alive anymore. It was such a dark season. And now God could have, right? And what I thought God should probably do in a situation like that, how I was programmed to believe God would respond to me, is to zap me. Like he was looking to come down with this iron fist and just hammer me, right?
Yeah.
But instead, God did something completely different. His Holy Spirit spoke so softly to my soul. And what he said, Julie, there's nowhere you can run that my grace won't find you. And so when God told me that night to love you like he had loved me, immediately my mind went back to the edge of that bar. Immediately went back to that season where I experienced and encountered the love of God, a love that was unmerited. I didn't deserve God's compassion. My actions certainly didn't warrant that tenderness, but God gave it. And so that night, that fight, when God began to speak to me, I knew I needed to make some changes. And so what I chose to do is I chose to forgive you and all the offenses that I carried against Greg, not because I thought Greg deserved it at that time, but because I knew God did. So I chose to love you, whether I ever got what I thought I deserved from you, because God loved me that passionately, and he was calling me to love with that unconditional love as well.
That's awesome. I think everybody can relate to that story on some level. We've all needed grace. And so I think in essence what you're encouraging us to do is to think back on those times when we needed grace the most. sometimes when I'm in that place, I think about, like, what's the worst thing that I ever did, right? What's
Yeah.
the worst thing that I ever did? God forgave me of that.
It's so good, babe. Yeah.
And when I realize that God forgave me of that, then it gives me the strength and the encouragement to offer that same grace to the other people in my life. So remember, as you grow towards a thriving marriage and you begin to exercise those muscles, some of them that are unfamiliar exercising, remember where the power to forgive comes from. Remember that the power to forgive comes not from your self-will. Now, self-will is important, but it's not enough. I have a military background, and so I understand discipline and willpower, right? But I also learned over the years that my willpower would fail me. You know, there's some days that your willpower just isn't enough strength. If it was, then we would never sin or never have any problems. But one of the things that we learned along the way, too, that helped us a lot was that it's not just the willpower, but that it's inspired willpower. In other words, it's not just discipline, it's inspired discipline. So where does that inspired discipline come from? It comes from God, but it comes from within you as well. Why do you want to have a thriving marriage? Again, what's in it for you? What is the desired result? It's such a powerful question, isn't it? The second thing is that this power doesn't come through suppressing our feelings. So often we think that we just need to not say anything, or we just need to stuff it, or we need to sweep it under the carpet. Or what could be worse is spewing off every feeling that we have. And neither one of those are correct. It's actually, again, a matter of surrender and then truly extending grace and remembering how we needed grace. And also remember that it only derives from an ongoing intimate relationship with Christ. That's why we put so much emphasis in the beginning here on our relationship with Jesus, because it really was the game changer for us. When we get this relationship right, then these relationships go a whole lot better.
It's so good, babe. You know, I know for me that our relationship is a lot more strong when I take time for this relationship.
Absolutely.
It's when we take the time to have this relationship, here's what that relationship with God does for us. First of all, it changes our motives. It changes our thoughts from the inside out.
Yep.
And I think a big part of that is because I stop comparing myself as to whether you're deserving it or not. And God becomes the place of reference. I look to Jesus to see how Jesus would respond in his character. And so then my measuring stick, if you will, isn't whether you've done the dishes or helped out with the laundry or anything like that. It's,
Although that helps.
it does help, yeah.
Just saying, guys.
But what really happens is as this relationship is strong, we have a clear model. And from the inside out, God gives us the strength to be able to focus in on the things that we need to change about us, not what our spouse needs to change. The second thing that happens is it empowers us and compels us to love and to extend grace. I think also as we have that relationship with Christ, it reminds us of who the real enemy is. Our spouse isn't our enemy. And as we realize, look, there are two entities. There is a Father in heaven, and there is Satan in hell. And both of them are fighting for us. Both of them are fighting for our attention. And when this relationship is right, it helps us to fight and countersuit all the other messages that come in.
Absolutely. The third part of forgiven freely is simply letting go of the offenses. Stormy O'Mardian says it this way: the past should not be a place we live, but something from which we learn. When couples harbor offenses, it creates a physical distance, it creates an emotional distance, and it creates spiritual distance. Think about that. I don't think that's anything that we're wanting to birth in our marriage, yet for some reason, when we get out of sync in our relationship, those are the very things that we find ourselves doing. It doesn't make any logical sense, but yet we find ourselves in that place. You know, one thing that I've learned over the years is that what you feed grows, and what you starve dies. So in other words, if I want to look for all of the reasons to justify how I'm getting the short end of the stick or how you're not meeting my needs, I'm going to find plenty of evidence to bear it out. Guarantee it. Because I'm feeding those thoughts, and I'm going to find evidence that will back it up. Likewise, If I'm looking to celebrate and look for all of the reasons to celebrate her and to serve her, then I find lots of reasons to celebrate her and serve her. Now, again, it's a new habit of thought for most of us. It was for me anyway. But after a while, it becomes a way of life. It becomes a new habit, just like any other habit.
Today, I find all the things that I love about you. I find all the things and all the ways that you serve me and serve our kids. And so when I think back to that season of time when forgiveness wasn't easy, I'm also very mindful that not everyone is in the same condition that our relationship is. And so for that, I just want to remind you that forgiveness isn't something that just happens. Look, there was a time where I had to choose to forgive in my mind. I chose to speak the truth out loud of the things that I loved about Greg. I would remind my mind to remember what it was that made him great. I would choose to see all the ways that he was a good dad. And I would choose to see all the ways. And it was work, not because it was Greg's issue, but because it was my mind issue.
Well, maybe partially.
The third and final thing that I'd like to encourage you to do in that situation, if you find yourself in a place where you have to choose to forgive and it doesn't feel natural yet, choose some things that you can do that demonstrate what you love about your spouse rather than communicating what they're lacking.
So, hey, take a few minutes to reflect on the scriptures that we provided for you and invite God to help you let go of those hurts that you've been harboring. You know, someone once said that harboring bitterness is kind of like drinking poison and waiting for the other cat to die, right? Now, that's not exactly how they said it, but that's pretty much what they said.
Maybe in a dog.
Either way, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to harbor bitterness. Let it go. As you're going through these scriptures and answering the questions, take as much time as you need to write your answers, okay? Also remember that the same rules apply as what did before. Remember to focus on how you need to apply the principles of forgiving freely, not how your spouse needs to embrace that idea. Finally, we want to encourage you to pray this week's closing prayer as often as needed. You may even consider printing it out from your handout to help you as you go through and learn to practice forgiving freely. We'll catch you in the next session.